And then we're kind of here. Do you want to take a quick minute and we can see who is here today and welcome new faces and welcome veteran faces. Scott, do you want to start us off? I see your face.
Good morning, Scott Buchler, principal at Northwest High School. Happy to be here this morning.
Thanks. Anyone else? Who do I see? I see Tracy.
Good morning. I am Tracy Fisher. I am the new Communications and Community Relations Specialist for the network. Happy to be here.
Good morning. Hi, Phil.
I'll jump in there. Phil Stikatowicz, one of the assistant principals with Scott Buchler at Northwest High School.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'm Amanda Anspaugh, also another assistant principal at Northwest High School. And thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for being here.
Good morning. I'm Angela Watkins, Service Center Manager at Michigan Works Southeast.
Good morning.
I am Calvin Battles. I am the Adult Services Coordinator at the Jackson District Library. Hey, Phil, how's it going? How's Emma doing?
Oh, man, it's so good to see you.
It's good to see you, too. I hope your kids are doing good. Good.
Looks like we have Kim Price from Blue Cross on the line. No audio, but great to see everyone. Thanks for joining us, Kim.
Hi, Caitlin Williams here, Attendance Officer and Homeless Program Coordinator at the ISD.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tova Sheldon, Director of Learning Services and Instruction for Jackson County ISD. It's wonderful to see all your smiling faces, and thanks for everyone being here.
Good morning.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Ashlock. I am the Program Director at the Jackson Community Foundation.
Good morning, Dana.
Good morning. This is Molly Kaser at the Center for Family Health.
Good morning, Molly.
Good morning. And when we missed, and if people will join late, that's great. Just as Amy said, if you're able to put your name and email in the chat, we'll be able to follow up with you after with any resources or connections to people that you might meet today. So thank you for that. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll move to the next slide.
Maybe.
So this is our action planning process. This could look familiar to some of you. This is really at the network what we are using and encouraging our members to use around identifying problem statements, how to tackle big and small problems, the tools and the mindsets that are being used as you're implementing things, strategies, interventions, authentic engagement. And this graphic we tend to use often. Amy and I have been hosting monthly learning convenings virtually for the past, 6-ish months. And we put off to the right there, you'll see like inequitable policies, deeper dive. We've done learning convenings that are tied to the different steps around the action planning process. And it's been, I will say too, like a learning experience as we go, like, oh, this really works well. Oh, let's do this better next time. Let's do these things. So it's been cool to kind of work our way around the process. If you missed any of these learning convenings, they're also listed on our YouTube channel that we can send to you. Is it at the bottom of the slide? Sorry, I'm having, maybe it's not. Anyway, that's okay.
The link's at the bottom of the slide.
It is. I can't see it. Sorry. Okay. But just as if you want to get caught up, or maybe some of these terms don't make sense, those resources are available to you. But this is really the framework that we're going to work in today as well. And I think it's cool that we will hear from a couple different teams. We're really excited today because we're doing less of the learning convening and more hearing from a couple community teams. I will say partners because I know Amanda and Scott will be sharing together, but a couple different community examples on how they really use this framework, whether or not they realized it at the time, using this framework to really work through like a problem, issue, a thing, and to do it really well and authentically. So this will be the framework that we use, and as we hear a couple examples today. I'm gonna move forward, Amy. So these are our lovely panelists. You met them earlier, but Calvin Battles is with us, and he'll be sharing some learnings that he's had and through maybe expungement fair efforts and what that has led to. And then Scott Buchler and Amanda Anspaugh together will be sharing some learnings around their work with students in the schools, and also what data has showed them around how to best support students. So, and we're thinking too, as we go along and as we have a conversation, please keep in mind that this is structured, but also informal. So if you have a question or if you have a thought, please feel free to either raise your hand or unmute yourself, because we would really like to have this be authentic and also as engaging as possible. So we'll start, and I'll start with Calvin, if you don't mind. And this is part of the thing with the action learning process, is really having a place to start, right? So like, would you mind telling us a little bit about the problem statement or the issue that you and your team targeted?
Yes, absolutely. So I guess probably I should provide a little bit of background about where this team originated from and where, like, because it doesn't really exist anymore. So, 5 or so years ago, I was asked to be part of the Financial Stability Network, which was a part of the, I'm drawing a blank now, the Collaborative Network, I believe is what the overall overarching thing was called. So it was one of the three
strands.
Strands. Thank you for that. The other being shoot. Now I'm drawing a blank on the other two. I just had them in my head a second ago.
HIO and C2C.
Thank you. HIO and C2C. And my work group was the decriminalization of poverty work group. So what we did was we were looking at ways to decriminalize poverty. So we were looking at things that were barriers to people for acquiring jobs or getting housing, or any of the things that in the past they might have made a mistake that is stopping them from accomplishing their goals in the future. And what we came across, or what we came upon, was expungements. I don't remember exactly how we decided it. I think because the people in the group, there was someone from United Way, Bethany from United Way, Angela from Michigan Works, Hakeem Crampton from Community Action Agency, me from the library, Dana Ashlock from the Community Fund. So that we had like a wide array of people who work in these service areas. Zoe Lyons from DHHS. And I think that I think that the way that we came to the conclusion was we just talked about it, and we were like, what do we hear? What do we, when we're hanging around with the people that we work with, what do we hear? And eventually we got to people's past criminal records really hindrance them in a lot of different ways. And so we started doing a little research, and we figured out that in Jackson County, there was so many people who would have been, who were eligible for expungement, who just hadn't gotten their things expunged. I mean, things that happened to people 30 years ago who still had the thing on their record, and we did hear stories about how it was stopping them from getting housing and things like from 30 years ago. And so really that's how we started. We basically took our institutional knowledge of what we're hearing in our institutions, and we And that's how we came to our problem statement.
Okay. Thanks, Calvin. That's great. And I like how also it seemed to have like group feedback and like also people that maybe were working, when we'll talk a little bit about that later in the process also, but like people that might be working on the problem, the same problem or a similar problem as well. So you took this piece though, and it sounds like you could almost like narrow down your problem statement to, was it housing or employment, both?
It was really, it was poverty. So it's really both of those things, because obviously when it comes to poverty, if you can't make enough money, you're going to be in poverty. And if you can't have a house or you can't have, you're going to be in poverty. And so really it was not so much, the problem statement wasn't how do we remove the barrier to get people who have had previous things on their record, get them a job. It was more the problem statement, how do we decriminalize poverty? How do we make sure that there aren't barriers that people that don't need to be there, that people so that they aren't in poverty?
Okay, so like people that have a criminal record experience a higher rate of poverty than people that don't.
Yes, and when we looked up the statistics to make sure that we were in the same, that it wasn't anecdotal evidence, that we weren't just hearing things from the same person at each of our locations, because that does happen sometimes. We did find that statistically speaking, that is definitely the case. That one of the largest, like the correlation between past criminal record and poverty is very, very, very high.
Calvin, I love that statement. However, you've jumped ahead in the circle, and how dare you? Just kidding.
Sorry.
I'm just kidding. Thank you. No, that's great. I love that. I love that idea and the thought, and then that is part of the process too that we'll jump to in a few steps. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
No problem.
And then Scott and/or Amanda, I'm not sure how you want to divide it up, if you want to divide it up, but I'm hoping maybe the Northwest team, that's what I'll call you. Can you tell us a little bit about your problem statement or issue?
Sure, thanks. Well, obviously schools, one of the things we're always looking at is academic achievement and grades. So that's obviously a indicator out front. But what we do every year is called a MyFi survey, which is a Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth, where the kids in grades 9 and 11 actually are surveyed, and we talk about a whole bunch of things that are going on in school and where they feel. So one of the things that came up, one of the data points that we had is we had about 65–70% of our kids that did not feel connected to an adult in our building, which really surprised us because we felt we were really good at doing those things. So what we started doing then was looking at, well, how is this impacting academic achievement? How is this impacting their social emotional well-being? What really is the issue? So that was one of the data points that we pulled out to really focus on, is how do we get kids to feel connected to an adult in our building? Because we know what research shows that if kids that are feeling safe in the building and have an adult that they can go to, that they are going to be more successful academically. So that's basically where we started. And that was back in 2014. And it's been an ever-changing process. So, Mandy, is there anything you want to add?
Not necessarily regarding the problem, but I do think that in the education sector, we do look at a lot of data. The question is, what do we do with it? And I think this has, since 2014, this has been a situation where we're constantly looking at the data around this one particular issue and making adjustments, which we'll go through with you throughout this. But you had mentioned your circle, and it brought back the other various circles that we see in the world of education, but it all has to do with like gathering the data, planning, studying, and then implementing. So it's very similar no matter what graphic you're looking at. So I appreciate you sharing your graphic as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So it sounds like the Northwest team, and like you mentioned, Amanda, like as in the education world, you kind of are starting from a data heavy lens too, which I know not everyone, and really I love how your example is very different than Calvin's. So that's great. Thank you for for sharing that. And then we'll move to the next slide on who is most affected by this issue. And so both of you kind of talked a little bit about this, but this is kind of the data piece. And Calvin, I'll go to you first. And we talked a little bit about this, but you said that you had a hunch on a thing. And then this is really kind of talking about data to confirm things. So you want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to mention or add in, I agree that I find like our approach to this is quite interestingly polar. Whereas they started with data, we started with kind of anecdotal evidence and then went to the data to confirm our anecdotal evidence. I thought that was really quite interesting, but it sounds like you know, like two ways to skin a cat, as they like to say.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that, because the truth is that if the process is followed, right? Because the truth is that you could have been like, hey, we have this hypothesis, let's go do a thing, but you actually confirmed it with data, and that data could confirm it or not confirm it, right? So I think that part is important to acknowledge too.
And I also have a question for Scott and Amanda when the time comes, so I'm just going to throw it out there so they can think about it a little bit. After you looked at the data, did you go and try to anecdotally decide, like talk to people and say, okay, yes, what the data is telling us is actually what people are telling us as well? But I'll let you answer that question later. So who is most affected by this issue? So when it comes to, I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me, the people who are most affected by this issue are people who have a previous record of some sort. Now, I do want to preface this by saying things when it comes to expungement have changed. I don't know if people have been paying attention, but we just recently passed a law in Michigan just at the end of last year, the beginning of this year, that a lot of the things that we've been doing, they're going to automatically do. So one of the things like in order to get an expungement, there are certain criteria that you have to meet. You can't have more than 3 misdemeanors. You can't have more than 1 felony. It can't be anything sex trafficking related. It can't be anything like that. And so so kind of aside, I'm sorry. So who's the most affected by this issue? That is going to be people who have made a mistake in their past, who do not have the wherewithal to maneuver the system in a way that allows them to get that mistake off their record. With a lot of people, I mean, it does have a cost. It's about $200 front to back to get everything expunged. There's fees to the court, there's fees to the state police, there's fees to all these places. So some people don't have the money to do that. And some people don't have the wherewithal to maneuver the system in a way that they are allowed to do that. It is a kind of complicated process. And that's why we started the expungement fair, was because we knew we had a lawyer on staff, Michael Derby from Legal Michigan, or God, I'm drawing a blank on where everybody works today. Legal Services in Southwest Michigan. And then we used a website called Free Michigan Legal Help, which we are actually at the library a host of. So we knew how to maneuver that site, and Michael knew how to answer all the complicated lawyer questions that I didn't know how to answer because I'm not a lawyer, and I can't, even if I thought I could, I can't do anything because I can't give legal advice because I'm not a lawyer. And so that is kind of how we figured out who is most affected by this issue, was by thinking about the people who have these things on their record but don't have the wherewithal or the money to do anything about it.
Can I jump in with a quick question? I'm just curious, because everything we do is with an equity lens. Were you able to disaggregate the data either prior to or after the expungement fair to find out if African Americans were more affected or certain age groups, things like that? Like, you might not have that data right in front, but
That's a really good question. I know that we did a survey at the end, and I know that Angela is here, and I believe that I heard Dana as well. I don't think that we asked them specifically anything about race.
Okay.
And therefore we couldn't, I assume that we could make assumptions by looking at names, but that's probably the best that we could do.
Yeah, just curious, because we always, when we're breaking down data or looking at most who's affected, we always want to really focus in on that targeted population. So that's good to know.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And as we go along in the future, as we're providing expungements through the library, going forward, I think that that is something that we'll keep in mind. I think that that's one of those things that when you're creating a process or whatever, you miss things. And so it's good to be able to have someone be like, hey, this is really good data. You should make sure you get this, because that's one of the things that we're working the kinks out of right now is the survey at the end, because the process is the process. We've got that worked out pretty well now. It's like, what do we want to know? That's the part that we're looking at now.
That's great. Thank you, Calvin.
Yep.
All right, I'll jump over to the Northwest team, and then after we ask them, maybe we'll pause for a minute to see if any of our participants or crowd, it's not a crowd, I shouldn't say crowd, if any of our people have any questions. But Scott and Amanda, what are your thoughts on this? Who is most affected and how do you know?
Well, I was just gonna say, obviously our students are impacted by this, but I think going back to one of the comments that Calvin made was, we weren't looking for this data. It wasn't a part of our focus point. It just came out when we looked at the data, and we saw that it was threaded to so many different things. So obviously students are going to be impacted if they're not going to be having a positive relationship with the adults, but the teachers are also impacted by this because it creates behaviors, a connectivity. So classroom management was an issue, which then impacts other staff members, administrators, parents that are involved when those things happen. So simply with this one data point, I mean, everybody in our building and extended through families was impacted.
And Calvin, to maybe connect with your question earlier, perception data is very powerful, but it also can be gut-wrenching. And so from the staff perspective, it's hard to hear and see some of the perception data that comes through, but if you don't do anything about it, then you have a climate and culture issue within the walls of your building that doesn't get addressed. And teachers may have thought they were connected, but how deep was that connection with students? And so the systems that we have put in place has allowed for that deeper connection.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that and for tying it to Calvin's question too. That's great. Is there anyone in the meeting today and who is listening who maybe has a question for either Calvin or Amanda or Scott about the process or the stories that have happened up until this point?
Just a note too to keep in mind, you can always put questions into the chat. We'll be monitoring that. So if something comes up that you want us to address, because some things might come up as we go through the stories too. So.
Okay, we'll move along then. So this is the next part of the action learning process is the why things are happening. And we talk a lot about the why and why a thing is happening and how did you determine this? So Calvin, I'll go to you first, and however much you want to share, keeping in mind, just doing a time check. We're almost halfway through the circle. So we got this, we can do it together. We can do it. So I'll go to you first.
I think I mentioned it in the last one. I would say that the reason the issue was happening is twofold: is that either people didn't have the money in order to pay for the expungement, or they didn't have the wherewithal to maneuver the system in a way that they could do it. How did we determine this? I think that that's a really good question. I guess I should probably a little more background. So we had 2 expungement fairs, and I think that, and now we are providing the expungements through the library. So someone can call in and we will walk them through the process at the library. We will pay for everything. We have checks. We got a grant from the Jackson Community Foundation. But I think that the reason that we realized it was such a big thing was the first time that we had an expungement fair, we had like 20, 25 people show up. And the second time we had like 160 people show up. And so I think that's when we determined like, oh, this is a bigger issue than even we realized it was an issue. And this is like an ongoing issue. This isn't like, we clear everybody with a backlog who can get their things expunged and then it's just cleared. Like, that's not how it works. Like, every day someone's being charged with something, or someone is getting beyond that 2-year period where they can get an expungement. And so that is how we determine that it should be more like systems changey than it is programmatic. Because when we did the fairs, it was more of a program. One Saturday it was like once in March and once in September, and that was the extent of what we did. Now it's much more consistent. You can do it anytime. You don't have to wait for us to have another fair again.
And to your point, I know earlier you mentioned too that there's a law that's been changed, right? So I would even say, like, why is this issue happening is also because there was a law in place, right, that disproportionately affected this group of people. So both, right, the expungement and the law piece.
Well, and it was that there was a law that was in place, but it basically said, like, you have to go through this process to get expunged, right? Which anybody who works with anybody who doesn't really know how to maneuver systems knows that can be really, really daunting, right? If you don't know how to do something, doing that can be really, really difficult. What the law is saying is that if you meet the criteria that I mentioned earlier, your things get expunged after 2 years. And so really what's changing is it's not so much that the law was in place that was a hindrance. It actually was a help, the law that was in place, but it was shuffling people into a system that they don't understand and that they're not comfortable with. And so they give up most of the time before they even get into the system.
I see. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, no problem.
It's great. Northwest team, why was your issue happening? How did you know?
Well, I'm going to backtrack again and simply say, because we weren't even paying attention to it, honestly, because we thought we were good at it. But again, when the kids have voice and they're able to share that with us, we were focused again on just grades and academic growth. We didn't have supports in place to build those relationships or to make it a priority for our staff and our students to build those. We just, as educators, we go into this because we love kids and we're going to build relationships. Everybody's going to like me, and they're going to do what they need to do in my class. So the reality check sometimes is different. And like Mandy said, being vulnerable to take that data in and say, we're not perfect and we're not doing this the correct way. So the data was something that we continue to use. So again, when you have 70% of your kids that are telling you that you're not doing something well, you better listen. So, but again, I just simply think that we did not have a system for progress monitoring in the accountability piece.
I love the way all of this kind of digs deeper into like real issues. So a lot of times in our process, we talk about root causes, like what is actually the root causes. And when we look at a problem statement, we ask the why, we dig deeper. So, this is what's in front of us. So why is it happening? Why is it, kind of, why is that happening? And that's what you guys were able to do, is like not just say, okay, well, they can't get employment or housing, or they're not doing well academically. Well, why? So that was kind of this is really tied into like digging into the deep root causes and really adjusting at a deeper level. So I love that you guys were able to kind of keep going through and getting the data that supports it and asking more questions. So awesome.
I was also going to add that this was about the time where, teachers were so focused on their content, and their class is so important. And yet we were also hearing rigor, relevance, and relationships. Well, you can't get to the rigor and relevance unless you have solid relationships. And so to shift that mindset in the teacher world, especially at the high school level, where your passion is your content oftentimes, and to find that balance about putting relationships first, and then the rigor and relevance will come after that. I think that was not necessarily an issue of why it was happening. It was just historically how we as educators think, especially at the secondary level.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I just really appreciate, like to Amy said, as Amy said, both of your examples also are kind of leading with humility and also be like, oh, well, we have this thing and the data is telling us this thing and it may be different than what we thought. So like, what do we do? How do we do this thing together? So we'll move the slide into strategies. So this could be, what thing did you choose to address the problem? And realizing that there could be more than one, usually is more than a thing, but I'll go to Calvin first. So like, what strategy or intervention did you choose?
So I talked about in the last question. I'm sorry, I'm just jumping ahead. I'm like, I intuitively know what the next question is.
You're going to host the next meeting, actually.
Exactly. So we started out with a fair. We started out with an expungement fair at Michigan Works, a Saturday in spring. I can't remember exactly when it is. And we had about 20 to 30 people show up. We put things on each of our organization's Facebook page, and we had flyers that we let people know. We got good feedback from people afterwards. And so we decided to have another one about 6 months later with the expectation that we would have about 20 or 30 people show up. And when I arrived at 9, there were already 60 people waiting in the lobby at Michigan Works. So after we did the second one, we were talking about how we were going to continue to provide this service to people. And there were two things that needed to be done. We needed to get some grant money so that we could pay for the expungements for people, because I do think that the cost is prohibitive for some people. You know, some people just don't have $200 lying around, you know. And then the second one was, do we want to continue doing this every 3 months? I mean, it's a Saturday every 3 months for 20 of us. That, you know, we thought that there was a better solution. So we were talking about it, and we decided that the better solution was to, if we could get a grant for it, was to house it at the library and have us at the library provide the service that we were already providing to people, but then also giving them the checks and making sure that they understood the rest of the process. And that is why we transitioned from a fair to, like I said earlier, a sort of programmatic response to a more systems change response. Like, let's offer this all of the time to anybody, so that you don't have to wait for the next time that we have a fair, and you might not be available. You know, a Saturday afternoon or morning, you might have other things that you have to do, and so this gives more of a chance to participate in getting their previous criminal records expunged.
That is great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Northwest team, what strategy or intervention did you choose to address your problem statement?
Mandy, I'll let you take the lead here. It's your baby.
Yeah, well, I actually came into this and was hired at Northwest the year after it got up and running. And so the evolution of the program, so basically a small team researched how to engage students and develop some type of system where students would feel connected. And we connected with Coldwater High School and Sturgis High School, who had some kind of a model of what we had in mind. And so we took pieces and components from each of those. And so we, historically, you may have heard of maybe like homeroom or advisory or seminar. And so that was really the first item of business, was what are we going to call this time where we want students to build relationships with teachers? And then how are we going to grow the content during this time? Because teachers don't like downtime either, especially if it's not in their content areas. So we landed on, at that time, 5-6 years ago, a seminar. And we started meeting twice a week for 25 minutes. And the goal was that we would do grade level seminars, and you would remain in that grade level with that teacher all 4 years. And so that became the family concept that we were looking for. And then throughout the course of that time period over the last 5 years, every trimester or at the end of the school year, we would survey the students, we would survey the staff. And this was also the time where we also started to see a lot of youth mental health concerns coming into the school more and more that needed to be addressed at the school level, and trying to connect them with some outside supports. And so we knew that we wanted to grow our program into, instead of just 2 days a week, into 4 days a week. But staff buy-in, which Kelvin asked about, wasn't quite there yet until about a year ago when we surveyed the staff at the end of the school year, and the shift happened. The shift in, no, I don't want more time, to we need more time with these kids. And so I guess over the course of the last 5 years and seeing this program evolve into what it is now. And again, we'll do the same thing. We'll survey the staff, we'll survey the students at the end of this school year to see what changes we need to implement, any adjustments that we need to make. And again, I think we last year was our first year where the graduating seniors had been with their teacher all 4 years. And to see the connections made with that graduating senior class and their, now we call it focus time, because we have different focus opportunities each day, since we've grown it to 4 days a week instead of 2 days a week. And so it's really neat to see the connections being made with their teacher and and this is kind of a cross of students in terms of their likes and interests. And so they become a small little family and a small group of friends. And you start to see these teachers meet up with their focus kids at Roxy Cafe. And so it's really grown into what we've wanted it to grow in, but it's been to get the buy-in from staff and students. And again, we'll talk about some of the challenges here in the upcoming slides. There are still challenges. Scott, feel free to add anything else.
Well, just real quick, one of the things, going back to the original kickoff of this was teachers honor that academic time, and we wanted to do that. So we tied it to a class, and it was, in an academic goal, we saw that our achievement data of our kids were not reading for information very well. So we implemented sustained silent reading to help build reading, but also the sidekick was that you're going to be sitting in that teacher's room doing it together and building that relationship. So we had to kind of do some seed planning with forethought to get it started.
And the other thing I was going to add is we started to look at the research behind improved behavior, improved grades, improved attendance, and its relationship with being connected to somebody in the building. So we started to put that research in front of our staff during staff meetings and book studies, that type of thing, that they would start to gain like a trust that what we were doing was going to work.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. We'll move to the next slide. Might have to, maybe we've got a few coming up. All right, just checking our time here. And I think both of you have maybe talked about this. Maybe it can be a quick summary too, but authentic engagement obviously is at the core of our process. And we talk about authentic engagement in every step of our action planning process, and how no decision should really be being made, right, without the people that are closest to the problem. So Calvin, you did talk about it a little bit. As per usual, Calvin, usually you have talked about things ahead of time already. Is there anything you wanted to add about authentic engagement throughout your process?
That it was a very organic thing. It wasn't, I know oftentimes when it comes to authentic engagement that it's one of those things that you have to like go out of your way to get, because it can be very difficult for you to get it from people, because you have to be asking the right questions. Ours was much more organic when we were working with people in our organizations. we were asking them, you know, what is like, why can't you get a house, or why can't you get an apartment for rent? Why can't you get a job? And it all seemed to be flowing back to the issue with past criminal convictions.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, we were really lucky in that a lot of us already work with these people who are having these struggles daily. And so we really didn't have to go into the community and ask people. They were coming and telling us when we were trying to help them, this is why I can't do that thing. So we were really, really lucky. But I do think that authentic engagement is really important. And I think that if we, I think that if we wouldn't have had those experiences, we would have made an effort to go out and make sure that whatever things we're assuming about what's stopping people from being poor, we would have gone out and tried to make sure that we were right, that we were getting things confirmed.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. And I like the fact that it's also, there could be multiple ways to authentically engage people, and that the point is that, do you have their input? Do you have their voice? Are you using their words and their thoughts to make your decisions? So thank you for sharing it that way. Northwest team, what about you?
Just to piggyback on that, our three key stakeholders were our staff, our students, and parents. So we ended up getting some feedback from all of them, and our goal was not just to implement for compliance, because we knew we would not get the results that we needed. So it took time, but we kept, like Mandy said, we put the data in front of them. We trained them. We kept coming back. And if you just get input and don't do anything with it, you again lose credibility and trust. So we kept working on what are some small changes that we can make to make this successful. And so we just kept trying to incorporate our voice from those three stakeholders, with not giving up our vision. And it was frustrating for us, because we knew it was going to be best for our kids and staff down the road, but we took the time to make sure that the foundation was laid solid so we could build on it.
And also with the team that sort of built this, it started off pretty small because not very many people believed in it. So it's hard to find a few teachers that believed in it. And once we did that, we stuck with the process for a couple of years. And then we put out there, would you be interested in being a part of this team? And when the data showed that there was more staff buy-in than there wasn't, then we grew our team into more people, more voices, more support around what we were doing. So I think that was growing our team was one of the best things that we could have done.
That's great. Thank you. So we will move to the next one. And so this might actually, actually, Amy, will you advance it to the next slide? And nope, yep, there you go. So let's cover 2 and 1, and then we'll go backwards. So just in time, for time's sake, would you both mind talking about maybe unexpected adjustments? So this can count as challenges, or maybe adjustments to the process. And feel free to include challenges, but just for time's sake, we wanted to make sure that we captured this piece. And Calvin, I'll start with you.
Well, the first one is the change from a fair to a more, I'm not sure, like a la carte version of the program. Like, so as opposed to waiting for a specific date and time that you could come in and get it any time. Once we had changed it to an a la carte, we had a bunch of things that happened. Mostly they're based off of COVID. So we got the grant and we were going to launch in like January or February of last year. And then maybe even a little bit later, maybe it was March, but then COVID hit and we couldn't do much of anything. And so once we came back there, we wanted to make sure that we were going to offer this. I was out of work for 3 months ish. I'm not sure exactly how long it was. It was a weird time. So, So what I did help some people like over the phone. They called and said, hey, I understand that you guys will help with this. And so I would call them and work with them over the phone, or sometimes we would Zoom together and I would walk them through it during quarantine, but then we couldn't pay for any of the things. So it only worked if you could afford to do that. Once we came back, we realized that we were going to give fingerprints, and it's impossible to give fingerprints while being socially distanced. So we had to figure out a way to get the fingerprints done. So we had to call courthouses and figure out who does fingerprints and who doesn't and what the cost of that is. And then we also had to deal with courthouses aren't open. And so we have actually delayed the launch of this again until the courthouses are more open for people, so that it's not another barrier. So someone isn't like get through the whole process and like, oh, I have to go to the courthouse and do these two things, but the courthouse is hard to get into, so I'm just going to quit. And that is, I would say, like just adjusting to the times that we live in. And I know that that's not a great example because we're not going to always live in these times. But I do think it's a good kind of microcosm idea about how you just, things come up and you look at them and you solve them and you move on.
That's great. Thanks for sharing, Calvin. I also like how you brought up the fact that like your goal is to try and make this process easier for people, and you did not want to set them up for a process and then actually create another barrier and to like see that happen, right?
It is a rather complex process. They have to use a website and fill out the information, and then there's like 8 steps. And if they're in one of those steps is a hard to accomplish, then what's the point of doing it? Is kind of the way that we look at it. Like let's make it so all 8 steps are fairly easy and fairly accomplishable and can be done in a reasonable amount of time. Because in my experience, and this is just personal experience, when a system, we all have a threshold of time. Like I'll work on this for an hour or 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever you've decided, like this is that amount of time that this is important. And, if you add more time onto it, you're just going to lose people who don't have that threshold of time, who are like, this is not worth that 2 hours. This is not worth whatever amount of time that it's going to take, it's going to take me to do this.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Northwest team, what about you folks?
I can speak, Scott, for a little bit. Well, Scott mentioned this. When we first started this strategy, we were trying to combine like 2 strategies into one. And so what was happening is we had this time, and part of the time was to build relationships, but the other time was we need to force them to silent read. And so teachers are like, how can we build relationships if they're silent reading and they don't even like to read? So then it became somewhat of a behavior problem during that time. So then the next year we came across some really cool advisory curriculum, and we were going to implement it, and it was really good stuff, except it was all for the college-driven student, and it didn't meet the needs of all of our kids. And so then we were like, whoa, we better scrap that because it's not meeting the needs of all of our kids. And then the year after that, cell phones started to become a big issue in the high school classroom. And so then it was like, how do I build relationships when I'm policing cell phones? And so again, the behavior started to escalate with battling the cell phones and also giving that like downtime. And so the evolution of our intervention during this seminar time or focus time, again, the only way we knew the frustration behind some of the challenges or unexpected adjustments was to survey the students and staff. And so that's where they kept it real with us. And based on their feedback, we made adjustments every year until we are finally at a point where everybody's seen, other than a pure fidelity, I can't say 100% of our staff is completely doing this with fidelity, but they're at a place where like, this is what we do. This is who we are. This is part of our system. And it's not going away, so I'm going to embrace it.
The only thing else I would add is our time became a sponge for certain other activities. So when we did our PBIS rollouts or district initiatives, we had a spot in our day where we could fill that. So it became a bonus that we weren't expecting either. With again, to honor our teachers, we honor your academic time. Your time is valuable. So that was just another adjustment that we allowed us to make that we weren't even prepared for.
That's great. Excuse me. Thank you for sharing. I really, excuse me. I love so much, again, like with this integrity of the process piece, I feel like there's such a big piece of like adapting and adjusting to things that come up, whether it be like COVID or pandemic, or actually like we tried this thing and we thought it was going to be the best, but actually we were wrong about that. So like, let's check ourselves and like what actually is best. And that like, I can't think of a process that happens that doesn't end up with adjustments, right? So thank you for sharing that. Many apologies. We had lots of other things. We're going to kind of fly through some of the slides, but we'll move to the next slide. Amy, will you land on the action planning process? Let's go there. And just here, so it sounds like Calvin, like your current status is like still implementing the strategies and kind of putting an asterisk, right? Because of the adjusting to COVID and the courthouse pieces. And that's great. And Scott and Amanda, is there anything that you want to talk about, like the current status? And as you're like, is there anything that we're missing when it comes to like update or like where you are in the process or that we missed, I guess?
No, I think it's, we jump out wherever we need to on this now. It's, Calvin mentioned COVID, and we were able to even maintain this virtually with our kids. So it actually was really a saving grace from that aspect. But again, I mean, we're constantly doing data, and next year's group of kids may give us different information. We're not going to lose the intervention. We just may have to change how we put some things into that valued time. So
that's great. Thank you. I do want to, we'll pause for a quick second. And does anyone have any questions for Calvin or Scott or Amanda about the things they shared today? I do apologize. We did not leave enough time. We could have talked a lot longer, and we did not anticipate that, which is a great problem. But does anyone have any other questions that we didn't get to today that we could either answer today or follow up with our panelists?
I have a question for Scott and Amanda. Are something similar to what you guys implemented being implemented at the younger age group, so the middle school and the grade school level, so that when it's not, the disconnect is like being dealt with before it gets dealt with to you? I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
For sure. The middle school does advisory as well. And one of the big things that we have to do is, I mean, our academic time is where we get our funding. So whatever we had to work around with state and FTEs to make sure that when we implement it, there is curriculum and different things. So, but the kids can come up here and know that we have something similar, even though it's different. They have an idea of what it is.
Yeah, Kelvin, the middle school had advisory 1 day a week, and we didn't have anything. So then we implemented 2 days a week, and they're like, ooh, that's a good idea. So we've been kind of piggybacking off of each other to enhance both of, and theirs is a little different as well. It still offers some type of academic intervention time, but it also builds, like they do a lot of character building within their models. So it does help us, because even though we don't call it the same, they know that time is slated for non-academic time per se.
That's really cool.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. And also to that point of, right, like kind of changing the culture and climate of the district and the area, not just getting to it when they get to be adolescents. That's great. So we'll skim through a few of the last slides. Essentially, Amy and I just want to highlight a couple things. There are some tools that we'll send you. The action planning worksheet and guide are tools that the network has to kind of help you through this process. If there are members that are trying to do an intervention or trying to do an activity and they're stuck in a certain place, these are some guiding questions that can help you navigate through the process. So we will include these in an email to you afterwards. And then we'll skip, oh yeah, this is just Amy and I. We'll sum it up and say, we're here to help. We can do all of these things. Please come to our monthly convenings if you find it valuable. And we have a website, we'll make sure to include, but if you want to skip to the next slide, Amy, Amy designed this beautiful, we call it the board game. And this is also kind of a visual of what it could look like. Amy and I serve as coaches and consultants to kind of help you along. Like, say, for example, Calvin like reaches out afterwards and is like, Sarah, oh my gosh, we actually realized this thing about data and we don't understand them. We're kind of stuck. Like, there are ways, hopefully we can walk alongside you all as you navigate the systems change, as you navigate the action planning process, knowing that it's messy and complex, and we would love to walk alongside you and help you through it. So a quick snapshot of this, and then just a plug, because we are getting ready to host some action planning workshops coming up, and each of our network members have the opportunity to create action plans and actually store them in our hub online. And that is actually probably more than 2 minutes worth of time to talk about, but it is a place for us to hear about what you're working on. So say, for example, Scott has an action plan in our system, and it talks about the system level aim is like making sure all students are successful, or there's an equity piece in there. And then Calvin enters an aim and says, actually, my aim is also equity. Oh my gosh, we're kind of working on the same thing. And the goal is really to start grouping people together and organizations together, to then you're learning from each other. Even if like the exact issue isn't the same, really like the root thing could be the same. So we're working on action plans, and we have action planning workshops coming up next week with our network council members. We're rolling out, like, piloting this. And then Amy, if you want to flip to the next slide, you'll see that we have action planning workshops coming up in February, March, and April. And these are opportunities for 3 or 4 members to join per session, and to really, we can walk you through the fields on the website to help you, like, what is your problem statement? Have you done this thing? And it's not to solve all of the world's issues in a workshop. It's really to help you set up the plan. And then we can together, like, set up a time later. If Calvin's like, actually, I am not sure about this problem statement, I might need to work with you on this. Cool, great, let's talk later. So it's a starting place, and we're really trying to help people. So it's not intimidating. So it's a thing that we all can put together, and that Amy and I serve as just thought partners and coaches for this. So be watching your emails. We're gonna create registrations for this and flyers, and we're gonna put the word out. And then these are just the end surveys. We have, at the end slide, we have a phone survey that's happening with our community assessment work group. There's a link there. Our website where you can find more information. We'll have a survey that goes out today, later today, for your experience today during the meeting. So please make sure to fill that out. And thank you so much to our panelists today, Calvin, Scott, and Amanda, and your transparency and your thoughtfulness and your incredible work in the community. So thank you for joining us. Here are my and Amy's contact information. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. But
we'll be following up after the convening with the slides from the convening, as well as the tools that we talked about in there, and a video recording. We have a YouTube channel, so a lot of these are available to community partners. If they were unable to join today, they can go back and take a look and kind of learn from the stories that we're telling. So thank you all for joining today.
Yes, thank you all for taking the time today. It was lovely to spend the morning with you.
Thank you very much. It was fun.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everybody.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.